Welcome everybody to episode 10, double digits. We're in the double digits of this Forsaken podcast.
We're old.
We're 10 years old.
We're this many.
We are that many years. We're still in elementary school. We're getting there 1 week at a time. We age one whole year every 7 days. What a thought. What a thought. No, it was a very boring week. I don't know if boring is the way to say it. It was like a very telegraphed week, at least on the NA side of things. APAC was not as telegraphed, but...
Yeah, but I don't know about you, but every time I see London win, it's like the first time.
Even when it's against like a dumpster fire of a team, you're still like, man, I got super pumped.
It still awakens something inside of you that's just... You know, it's like life is happening the way it's meant to happen. We are in the best timeline.
When London wins a game.
Yeah, but if you don't say it that way, if you just say when London beats New York, if we were like 2 years ago, that would just blow people's minds, you know?
2 years ago, 2020?
Or 3 years ago, 4 years?
No, because you go back 4 years ago, London was a good team.
Yeah, no, so it would have been... Yeah, 3 years ago.
Are you talking 2018 or 2019? Ago?
When was GOATS? 2019?
2019.
Yeah, 2019. You go back 2019, 3 years ago, right?
So
yeah, and that would have blown people's minds.
I don't know what you're trying to push, but it just let's drop.
Anyway, moving on. London's amazing.
That's amazing. The OW2 Beta. We're here, boys. We're not there. We're watching everybody else. We're literally the Squidward looking out the window, watching everybody else play. Who's bought the watch point pass?
That being said, all of those fans that have been waiting for Junker Queen on r/Junker Queen mains for like 3 years.
Wait, is that a thing?
Yeah, it is. It's like the most dead subreddit you have ever seen.
That's some dedication. What the heck?
Yeah, it has like 10 people on it, I think.
Well, now they can enjoy.
But now those 10 people,
hopefully they all bought their pass. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully they all bought their pass. We haven't bought the pass. I've debated buying it. I might. I don't know. They haven't been too specific as to how often keys and like beta codes are going out. If it's like only like once a week or so, all we know is like you're guaranteed to at least get a week of access. My thing is I don't know how much I would actually play of the beta just because I've got other things going on, but I'll debate it because you get 2,000 in-game currency for it, which according to the description of the Battle Pass would be enough to buy both the Season 2 and Season 3 Battle Pass. So you'd essentially be getting all 3 Battle Pass, the first 3 for buying the first. I don't really know the specifics on that, but that's kind of what's potentially what's going on. But we know nothing. We have not played any of it, and I haven't watched
if anyone
too much about it.
Wants to buy me the... I'm just kidding.
I don't think that's how that works.
I mean, it could.
I don't think that's how that works, but you know,
could. All of our adoring fans.
Sure. We'll get there when we get there, but we got some quick little news. We'll do quick fire like we did before. Really, the only news that came out this week was about Boston Uprising. Boston parted ways with the president of gaming himself, Huck, their GM, who has been with them since day one.
Crazy.
And been a pretty vital part of the Overwatch League just because he's always been there and has been with the team. He would argue that he's been a major part of esports, but president of gaming himself, he's now kind of parted ways with the team, so now Mineral is their interim GM as they look for another team. What's interesting about this announcement, though, is, they said Mineral will operate as interim GM as we look to readdress our roster and build for the future. Interesting. And then Halo tweeted out that there's rumors that Boston will be signing the Hitscan DPS Seeker, who played on Noble and Revival and I think Dark Mode. I don't know much about him, but I mean, I mean, it's probably not too difficult to find a decent upgrade over Victoria. No, like shade thrown at Victoria, but I mean, let's be honest. That DPS line is the weakest part of that team by a decent amount. So, good for Boston. Good for Boston.
Yeah.
They're learning, they're evolving to a point where they can beat lower tier teams. Good job. Good job, Boston. We're proud of you. But enough about news.
Although there is one other piece of news that I remembered and I didn't tell you beforehand.
What do we got?
I wanted to mention. But if anyone was following the story, Jane, the former Dallas Fuel coach, he went missing last week. And it was kind of terrifying for a few days, but he was found.
The Canadian Overwatch fans got together. They did a search.
Yeah.
A manhunt.
So he's found, he's safe, he's alive. And so that's good news.
Good news. So, Jane is back. The man who invented esports. Remember that? The inventor.
And the thing is, a lot of people throw a lot of shade on Jane and stuff, but I feel like, in all honesty, like he's done a lot for the community through the years. Like in a way, like I feel like I wouldn't have been as into like the esports side of Overwatch if it weren't for him. He was one of the people that got me thinking about things a lot more.
I never really had I didn't really interact or like watch a whole lot of him. So for me, he's not as big of a kind of a figure in my path through esports, at least for Overwatch. But I mean, he was in the Overwatch League with the Dallas Fuel, and his content that he created was
Team Canada coach.
Team Canada coach, of course.
Oh, yeah.
The Team Canada that came third in the World Cup.
Yeah.
Oh, Poggers. Yeah. But enough about that. It's time to talk about some Overwatch League games. So this week we wanted to do something a little different. We're going to do something called the 3-word game. So what we're going to do is we're going to alternate, of course. We're going to go through each one of the 15 games this week, and we're going to alternate, and one of us will give a 3-word phrase that reflects our thoughts on the game, a meme from just thoughts on the game, to describe the game, as well as then we'll have a short little discussion about each one of the matches. Just kind of a fun way to go through each one of the games and have a brief description of the game, but also just kind of open up discussion of it without having to without it being weird, kind of jumping from game to game. So the first game that happened this week was Fusion Valiant. So to me, the 3 words that I wanted to describe this game as was the Fusion experience. Fusion. You had him. You had him. You were up 2-0. You were up 2-0. And then you went to Gibraltar. Somebody please tell me what I watched on Gibraltar and what my eyes witnessed. All I saw on Fusion's attack was an endlessly feeding Belosria on Winston. Endless feeding. Just endless feeding on Winston. Preceded by a Queen Street map that they got full capped on when Valiant were running like Sombra, Zarya, Lucio Zen comps. And then by the time they got to map 5, they were just kind of boomed. This match just was kind of like the embodiment of like that meme where the guy sticks a pole into his own bike tire and then falls on the ground. That was kind of what I watched. That was kind of what we all witnessed was that it was Fusion sabotaging themselves out of a win and proceeding to get reverse swept by the Valiant. I'm sorry, Fusion
But
fans.
if any team was going to do it, it was going to be Fusion.
Fair enough, it would be
I feel
Fusion.
like they're the most consistently inconsistent team in the league.
You say that when there's literally a Washington Justice team in North America.
We don't. Who's that? They don't exist.
They don't exist. But
not after what they've done to
that
me.
Game, that what a way to start off the week with a Valiant reverse sweep over an incompetent Fusion who just tripped over their own doings. But then
led to the next game,
what led us into another map 5 banger of the Chengdu Hunters versus Seoul Dynasty. What
3-word phrase. So this is actually 2 phrases. which totals out to 3 words.
Wait.
Close. Smurf diff. Smurf diff. Oh yeah. I would say both teams, the DPS looked beautiful. There were like really crazy pop-off plays on both sides.
I was surprised that Hunters were even able to come, because we thought we were like, oh, Jinmu's they don't know, but somehow. But like
Jinmu looked so crazy good at times.
The Jinmu Tracer.
Yeah, like, which was kind of crazy, but it looked good, you know? And that's the thing, like, Chengdu really surprised me on that. But I think when it came down to it, Smurf's ability to play any tank, depending on the situation, was, I think, what kind of gave them the edge, you know? And you know, he didn't always look amazing. Like, I remember, like, there were a couple times he played the Sigma, and it didn't look amazing. But I think overall, Smurf was kind of like the big thing that separated them to me.
Well, and we got to see, this 2 Soul games kind of mesh a little bit, because did we get to see Stalker in this game? I think we did, right?
I want to say we did, but I can't remember.
Because he came out, because they were running him on Tracer on Control, is what I believe. I remember he was played this week, all right. But the Hunters were what surprised me a little bit, because I mean they've committed to the Gaga ball. We're like turning back to 2019. It's like Gaga's channeling his inner Among. They're just rolling out on Hammond, and they're making it work. But I mean, Dynasty or Dynasty. So the fact that Chengdu was able to take them to 5, I mean, you can probably equate it a little bit to it being the first match of the tournament for APAC. So they, still trying to figure out what they want to play.
Yeah, and I think the other pretty significant thing about this match was we actually saw some good Sombra play. For probably the first time this year where, like, the Sombra was picked and it didn't seem like they were throwing, and both teams brought out the Sombra at different times.
Yeah, they both used it.
But I think the big thing was Fitz had some crazy EMPs that it was just enough to disrupt the enemy team. And I think a lot of it came down to the fact that they were running the ball.
They were running the ball.
Was like always hacked, which, hack at this point, it's just an interrupt. It doesn't like completely remove the ability to
on
move.
A hero like Ball, who's so easy to hit, having that damage increase onto him and just getting him out of ball form. I think against Ball is like one of the only times that Sombra, like Ball and Doomfist, but Doomfist is harder to hit than Ball.
Yeah, well, and plus, because into the Ball, you also charge your ultimate a lot quicker,
more health
versus other tanks because they have more health and it's easier to hit. And so it's like, it Fitz really proved that Sombra is viable in certain circumstances,
of course,
but no one else should be running it.
You heard it here. Don't you dare. I already had my rant. What was it, last week? Towards NA.
Yeah, the giant
stop
Sombra. Yeah, that's the thing. I feel like APAC, you get the can run Sombra pass. But NA don't run it.
Don't run it ever
because no one's running Ball in NA. Really,
well, no, I mean, people run it on Control, but that's it. No one's going Gaga playing at every map.
Exactly. And so, but next team,
your favorite.
I called it because it's London, and easy 3-word phrase: best team NA. Bam. Enough said.
They beat New York. Calm down.
That being said, they are undefeated.
They are
this tournament cycle.
They're
killing it.
A good 3-0.
Yeah, the only other team with that, I think, at this point is San Francisco, right?
Glads.
Is anyone else?
Glads haven't lost.
Yeah.
Like,
they don't count.
Glads haven't lost yet.
But look at that company. You have the Glads, you have the Shock.
Let me think. London. Who has Spitfire played? They played Toronto, Mayhem, and Excelsior. What a great schedule.
Hey, still undefeated.
No, I'm not trying to discount the Spitfire. They took care of business, and that was what mattered. If they had looked shaky against Excel, we'd be like, well, what is happening? But just business as usual. They continue to look good on the Poco Sigma comps. Sparker on the Sojourn has been doing great. Shax when you put him on Tracer.
I think
there's no problem with this team, and I mean their upcoming games aren't too terribly difficult up until they play Fuel, because they play Paris this week, I think, and Justice, where it's like those aren't.
And so I think London at this point, they pretty much have a pass into the mid-season showdown.
As long as they don't throw, yeah,
which is really good to see, and it's going to be interesting to see how they stack up in tournament play, because I feel like, with the pressure and stuff, some teams just come out of their shells and dominate, kind of like how Atlanta did in the last tournament, where it's like, even though they came in not at the top of the seeding or anything, they ended up looking really strong and like one of the best teams. And so I think London, you never know, they could do something crazy.
Maybe.
So it'll be interesting to see.
But
I'll keep my hopium.
Well, I mean, it's not like there's no reason to not have hopium. They haven't done anything that like makes you be like, oh, like worried about them. They're just consistent. They beat the teams that they should, and they don't lose to teams that they shouldn't, which is more than can be said than probably half of North America. Yeah. So whatever. Moving on to the other a team that we were kind of worried about coming into this week a little bit because they look shaky. Fuel Mayhem. What say ye? What are your thoughts?
Dallas back, baby. Oh yeah, we saw the Fuel. That okay, not really.
Not really.
Let's be real. This Fuel is still not like I feel like Mayhem right now look really shaky.
Yeah.
Like that's one statement. Mayhem look really shaky.
That's more than Fuel, 3 words.
No. This is
Mayhem
past
look
the
shaky.
3 words.
There you go.
Mayhem look shaky. Oh yeah, that's the 3 words right there. But the Fuel also look like not themselves. Like I feel like just because there's a 3-0 here doesn't mean that Dallas is back to what they should be.
because
it just means Florida is looking really bad right now.
Fuel was relying a lot on they were doing like the Fearless Ball, and then I think they were doing Fearless Winston, because Hanbin. I don't. It's like they didn't just lean on Hanbin Sigma like you would expect them to. Like they weren't like even on Kings Row, they were going to Fearless Winston. They were like going to last patch and they were playing Winston.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say is both teams, if you look, like Florida was playing a lot of the Zarya comp as well. And so it was like it was kind of like going in a time
capsule, going back a little bit
into last patch. And it's like if both teams are playing it, then it's whatever.
And what's interesting is that because of the way that the meta has gone, like when you run the double flex support, like if you're running Zen Ana or you're running Zen Ana specifically, Winston's actually really good against that kind of backline, and you can run Zen Ana and get away with it if the other team's not running Winston. So you can dive their backline because it's suddenly like super vulnerable, which is why it's like if you're playing against a Winston, you just run like Bap Zen, or you run like Brig Ana, you run something to disrupt the dive, and then suddenly Winston. It's why we're not seeing a lot of Winston, is because teams just don't run Zen Ana. They swap away from it. So Fuel kind of went back. I mean, but they played some Rhine comps as well. Fuel, but they just didn't play Hanbin, which is interesting because like that was all that they did last tournament cycle. They just live or died by the Hanbin Zarya, but they can't do that anymore. So it's like, we'll have to see how they do in the coming weeks. But I mean, this week they don't play hard opponents, so they'll get some more wiggle room with it. So
I think the one thing with them, it's like at this point, I think they're pretty much guaranteed into the. They have
already qualified.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So I think the big thing is if they don't figure their crap out, they're just gonna look bad in the tournament.
They'll just boom out, which I mean they'll get a point though for participating.
Yeah, so I mean there's that, I guess.
They've got some time. But moving on to the game that happened following that, Atlanta Reign versus Vancouver Titans, and honestly, there's life here. Titans.
So wholesome.
Titan. I mean, Deepay. He taught them map 1. Map 2 and 3. Coming in the future. But I mean, they took push off of Glads last week, and they take push off of Reign this week. Like, Titans are showing signs of life, and makes me hopeful for this team moving forward into the second half of the season, because like they're already out of midseason qualification. And honestly, they've probably already screwed themselves out of end of season playoff contention.
Yeah.
But I mean, if they can try and string some wins together towards the second half of the season, like when they refresh their schedule and play teams like Paris, like New York, like Boston, they might be able to get enough wins to squeak them into the Countdown Cup like play-in tournament. Because I mean, they're just looking so much better. Like the Mirror Doomfist has been doing great for them, basically putting everybody on their best heroes. They're saying Shockwave just play Ashe, play Sojourn, play Echo. Aspire just play Tracer, and then like Aztec, Scarippa have been doing well. Like obviously, they're still losing. Like they're not.
That being said, they're playing teams that
real,
they should
they're
lose
playing
to.
real Overwatch. They actually look like a cohesive team instead of just a chicken with its head cut off. Like having DPay come in actually has been really nice for them in their first couple games this stage. And so I'm hopeful for the Titans moving forward to their other games, because it's just like they're taking maps off of teams that they should be like, that you would think they'd get 3-0'd by. So now you're like, okay, well Titans are playing, London Spitfire. Like, okay, well London are a much better team, but you're like, but I have to give Titans a map. Like, surely they're able to take one at this point, which is much more than we could say last stage. We're like, oh, they're playing Houston 3-0, but now it's like they're playing Atlanta. Let's give them a map.
And that's the thing, one of these weeks they're gonna take a match off of someone.
Yeah,
and it'll be good to watch.
One of these teams, but
and it's not going to be London.
Well, they don't play London in the coming weeks.
Oh yeah, they don't. Thank heaven.
You don't want to play this red hot Vancouver team.
No, it scares me. Just because one of these weeks they're gonna beat someone that they shouldn't. It's gonna be Washington. When do they play?
I don't know. I don't.
Yeah. But if they play,
the thing is, the Outlaws just played them last week and won. And if Outlaws can beat Titans, London can beat Titans. I don't think you have to be too worried about that. But now we go back across the Pacific Ocean, back to the APAC scene. Guangzhou Charge, Hangzhou Spark. What say ye?
GGZ Charge suck.
Oh gosh, you didn't have to be that cruel about it, but yeah, you're kind of right.
It's not wrong. It's like,
that's a fair assessment to make.
Like, I'll be honest, like, it's so hard because by the time I wake up, I'm not, hugely worried about spoilers. I'm fine watching games if I know who wins. But it's like, when I see Guangzhou played and I see it's a 3-0,
like, I don't need to watch.
Do I really want to turn this on? No, it's like, that was just.
It's sometimes
of a week of uninteresting games.
You're not.
That kind of took the cake as the least interesting match this week.
It's just Charge just don't look. They just don't know what they want to. They just don't know what they do. They just look like they're lost in the sauce. They have no idea what they want to do. Whereas the rest of APAC, it's like people are competitive. It's like, Guangzhou's on the schedule.
They lose.
They lose.
Yeah,
it's over.
And that's the thing. Like, any other team in APAC, they can take games off of any other team in APAC.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's Guangzhou. It's Guangzhou, just like,
who's not taking maps off of. Who are taking maps, but they're not taking matches. Like, their one win against Valiant last stage, maybe the only win they get. Honestly, they may not get any other wins.
Yeah, and in a region that has so few teams, that's just. It's bad to see.
It's sad, but Spark, I mean, picking up where they left off. Shy Alpha looking quality. I mean, they boomed out of the kickoff clash, but I mean, during the regular season, they look good, and they're kind of picking up where they left off.
They still looked really, really solid in this match.
They still looked really solid, but then we go from that match, which you saw it coming in, and you're like, yeah, that's an easy match. I don't need to watch that.
This match,
but then you come in to Shanghai Dragons Seoul Dynasty, and you're like, oh, here it is. This is going to be the 5-map series that we were promised. Not the case. Seoul Dynasty, my 3 words: team to beat. Seoul Dynasty, I think, are making a case for best team in APAC for sure, but I mean, they're making case for best team in the world even. Like they're like Shock and Glads are like their only competition. And if they played, I'd probably take Shock or Glads. But I mean, Seoul, as we talked about against their game against the Hunters, I mean, they're just, if there's a team that's firing on all cylinders right now, it's the Hunters. Because, you know, unlike Shock, who are undefeated, best team in, you know, in NA probably, they boomed out in the kickoff clash. Whereas Seoul won the kickoff clash and have not skipped a beat coming into the midseason madness, going and 3-0ing the Dragons. Seoul's just kind of built there, honestly.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure, isn't this the first time that those two teams have played this year that hasn't gone to
this is the first time, because they've played 3 times before, and every other time it went to 5, and Shanghai took 2 of those. I mean, they were 2-1. But now it's an even series 2-2. And I mean, Shanghai Seoul is the most storied rivalry in the history of the league. They've played each other like 20 plus times, whereas the next closest, you know, teams that have played each other are like 11, 12.
Yeah.
Like they play and they trade blows.
And yeah, I was going to say, and not only do they both play, but they both, it's kind of always them at the top of APAC, you know, and other teams make their way up there occasionally and stuff, but it's always those two. And
yeah, so you know, seeing this match go the way it did, you're like, oh, okay, Seoul's kind of pulling ahead. Seoul looks like they figured out 5v5,
and it looks like Shanghai, not so much.
Yeah, Shanghai's still working something. Literally the opposite of Seoul. Like Shanghai looking a little iffy, but Seoul, like, I don't know how you could ever I mean, Seoul's like the team to beat right now. Like, yeah, Hangzhou's like right there with them, but I'd take Shanghai. I'd take Seoul over Hangzhou. So, you know.
Although Shanghai, you mean shaky high?
No, don't. No. No. Let's no. Moving on. The other APAC game that took place on Saturday. You know, we continue Fusion Hunters. What do we got? What are your words of wisdom? Your
APAC is weird.
It really is.
It's just like I feel like, I don't know, and maybe it's not just this match, you know, it's just, I feel like every week we get a different region out of APAC. Like APAC is just like, it's like every week there's a new story. This week it's like Shanghai fallen, Seoul looking insane, Philadelphia can't win a game. You know, and it's like, but next week it could be completely different. It could be Shanghai on top, Seoul fallen out of glory, Philadelphia unbeatable. It's like all of these storylines could happen from week to week. You never know, and so it's like you can't look at this and be like, oh man, Philadelphia's, you know, unable to clutch games, because it's like, yeah, this week that's true.
Next week may not be true.
But next week it might not be true. So it's like, what do I say?
What do I do with this team?
Yeah, like, do I say, oh man, I'm worried about Philadelphia, and then next week we like this weekend we watch the matches and it's like, man, I'm an idiot. Like Philadelphia is just insane. Like Philadelphia is beating Hangzhou or whatever. You know, like you never know, and so it's like APAC's weird, and I just like. I feel like it was when I was watching this match, it was just like, I give up on this region.
The good thing, though, that this match did give some consistency, though, because, I mean, Hunters go to 5 against Seoul, and you're like, okay, our Hunters figuring things out. And then they 3-1 the Fusion. You're like, okay, they actually were supposed to do that, so it tracks, you know?
Yeah, so Chengdu this week...
Their 3-2 loss to Seoul really tracked to a 3-1 win over Fusion. And it's just crazy that the Hunters are able to do this and like hit scan metas where teams are running double hit scan. And they're like, we're going to put Jinmu on Tracer and we're going to put him on Genji. Beat that. And teams are like, oh, we can't.
Yeah,
we're going to run ball. Well, we got to see Daisy though, because they went to Circuit Royal. So we got to see some Sigma play. And Monk is kind of a freak. Yeah, putting that out there. What's interesting, what I'm curious is how long can Hunters get away with this? And
that's the big thing is because like that's kind of the question for Chengdu most of the time, and that has been for years. It's like, how long can they get away with running weird stuff? And it's like while they can, Like they'll win things. They'll look good in tournaments, but if it gets figured out,
the thing for Chengdu is it never seems like their entire team is meta. Because like last stage, it was like you could play Genji, but Gaga couldn't just play ball. And then you come into this stage, it's like, Gaga can play ball, Monk can play Zen.
But what's Jinmu going to play?
And you're forcing,
and he makes it work.
They make it work. So can they continue to make it work is the question.
And I don't think they can.
But I mean, they went to 5 against Seoul. Like, it was
this week. Yes.
Yeah, it's this week. But they don't play Seoul again until the
yeah, but who do they play next week? Who do they play next week?
Next week the Hunters play Valiant.
Okay, then they probably can beat them, but it's like one of these weeks they're going to
like when they play Hangzhou, will they be able to beat Hangzhou? So it's they can get away with it though. They have an identity. They know they want to play ball and they have problems they have to work around, but they're doing their best to solve the problems, and I feel like they've always done that. They try and make it, what they have work, but it's like this week they're playing Jinmu Tracer's looking good, but then next week th're going to come out, Jinmu's going to play Pharah and get run over, They're always the wacky. The Chengdu zone never disappears, ever.
Yep.
Okay, but then we move back to NA, and we've got the
oh wait, Washington, Toronto.
We have the eye bleach match, boys.
Yeah.
So I have many.
I blocked that match out of memory.
I have many 3-word phrases that I can use for this one. First one, never pretting again. I said that after when we were pretting last week that if Justice lost this match, I was never pretting them again. I am joining Reinforced Custo. I'm joining them, never pretting them ever. Even when they're playing like Titans and stuff, I'm still pretting against them because this team makes me upset. So that's the first 3-word. The second one is eye bleach match. Even though Toronto looked okay, it was not pretty. I mean, Muse just diffed Kalios on Doomfist. But what's funny is Muse said that he picked up Doomfist like a couple days before the match and won. And then another 3-1. Justice embodies sadness. I'm sorry to every one Justice fan that exists, but like this team, Fusion hurts, but at least Fusion makes it to tournaments, but they finish second. Justice just doesn't do anything. They can't even get to second place. So Justice, what are you doing? What are you doing? And they required Decay and Happy to just go Super Saiyan. But in this match, Decay and Happy were absent for the entire game. And what happened? They got rolled by the Muse Doomfist. So bad. And the last one that we'll get to and explain on later is outside looking in. Justice they're no longer in top 8, and we will cover that in a little more detail later on in the episode, but this match, Justice are never again, ever. I'm never pretting this team ever again, ever. I'm putting that on my will. Whoever inherits my stuff, if you pret Justice, you automatically forfeit your rights to everything.
No more Justice.
No more Justice. Get out of here with that mess. I don't want it. Get it out. But now we go to Shock Rain. Now it's your turn.
Okay, this match, my 3-word. Oh, let me find it. Oh, yeah. Shock can't lose. They just can't. Regular season games, no one can beat them.
There you go. I was about to be until they go to LAN, but
Yeah. No, that's a asterisk.
It's the regular season buff. Is that what it's not? It's the regular season buff.
Yeah, they've got the regular season buff, and it's like any regular season game, you kind of have to expect San Francisco to win. I don't know why. I know why. You watch them. I don't know why they can't pull it off in tournament.
Well, but it was LAN. They had a team of rookies. You can't really blame them for it.
Yeah, and so it's I was a little worried after the last tournament, what kind of San Francisco are we going to see going forward? Because, if you're winning everything and then you get to tournament and you lose, that can mess with your mental. And so I was a little worried that, that would affect these next few games, especially, because they lost pretty hard to Atlanta, didn't they? In the
tournament? Yeah, tournament? It was like a 3-1, I think.
And so I was a little worried going into this match that, Atlanta might show up again and break the shock. But the shock looked really good.
Yeah. Shock. I mean, there's nothing. I mean, 10-0. I mean, and they're coming. Their next couple games, I believe they're like a perfect first half of the season. It's pretty likely. I mean, a 12-0 start to the season for the Shock. It's like I don't see them dropping a game in the regular season until they have to play like Glads or Fuel again.
Yeah, and it depends on what the Fuel are looking like at that point.
That is also true. But
Fuel right now are not quite, I think if they played right now, it'd be pretty dominant.
Oh, they did.
The Shock.
Oh, well, how funny that they played last week. What was the result? Right. It
was
they did
3-0.
But speaking of the Fuel, I mean, they played the Titans, and honestly, surprisingly close series.
Yeah.
We were genuinely like a fight or two away from Titans being up 2-0 going into map 3. Which says a lot about Titans, but also says a lot about Fuel. Yeah, they beat the Mayhem, but when you almost have to go to 5 maps against Titans, it's not great. Like, Fuel escaped with a 3-0. Let's say that. Mm-hmm. Like, Titans threw Coliseum. They should have won Coliseum. Like, they were gunning for it and just threw. Like, they had the lead and just kind of burned it away. Same thing when they went to the second map. So, like, this game was way closer than it should have been. Like, yeah, it was a 3-0, but this is one of those games where that map score does not do the Titans justice and makes the Fuel look better than they are. I don't know. Titans are evolving, and Fuel are kind of just there.
Yeah,
I don't know. This Fuel currently is not going to be able to beat top teams. Like, they'll be able to squeak out wins against the middle teams, like they did against Mayhem. Mm-hmm. But like, if this Fuel played Outlaws, it'd be map 5, and I would almost pred Outlaws against it. Like, unironically, unbiased would pred Outlaws almost. And the only thing that would prevent it would be Outlaws maybe messing
Outlaws
it up.
Doing what they did this week.
Like, if this Fuel played London now, I think London can beat them. But like, they play in a next week, and it's like we'll have to see how Fuel does this week to see if they get better. But they play like New York or something, so they play like a bottom team. So we're not going to even get to see which kind of Fuel we're like looking at. Whereas Titans are playing more good teams this week. I think they play Justice. Yeah, they play Justice. Oh, okay. Titans, this is your chance.
Are we predding that game?
Oh, we are not, but we can. Yeah, I was like, I don't, because that would
be unofficially. Let's pred it.
We pred Titans.
Titans are gonna win.
Unofficially, off the record, I'm not messing with our pred rec. The reason I didn't put it in there was because I knew it was going to be a trap pred for both of us predding Titans.
I wouldn't pred Titans. I think if it was against you, counting for points.
Oh yeah, exactly. You would pred Justice.
Yeah.
But it's like I didn't.
But you
unofficially off the record. Titans, do something. Make the Justice look silly, please. Do it. Do it for all of us.
But on the record, happy. Come on, dude. I'm just kidding.
Moving back to APAC, Charge Valiant.
Okay, this one might come as a shocker. This 3-word phrase, kind of crazy. GG, easy, Charge suck. I just like...
Run it back.
I don't like the Charge, And
yeah,
I'm kind of biased going into anything Charge related. I'll be honest. But it's just like... Yeah,
they're there. They exist.
They're there. They exist.
They're certainly one of the teams I've ever watched in the Overwatch League.
And so it's like, I feel like
it's hard
any team playing against them, it shows more about that team than it does anything about the Charge. I feel like the Charge are consistent.
The thing is, it's like when a team plays the Charge, you end up walking out feeling either no change in your feeling about the team, or you feel worse about the team because it's like you dropped a map to Charge.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Valiant dropped a map to the Charge, and it's like, that feels bad for the Valiant. Like,
yeah, it's like, Valiant, what are you doing there? But I mean, we walked out of this match like, Marvel's Doomfist is at least somewhat legit. Like, they played against a boomed Fusion and then Charge, so you can only walk away with so much. But they won it. and convincingly so, because they lost. Their Charge's only win was last stage. So when Valiant is able to beat Charge, you're like, all right, Charge, you are alone. You are alone at the bottom, and it's not particularly close.
And speaking of the Charge, that reminds me of my sponsor for the week, our sponsor of the week.
Oh, boy.
This week, we have a very special sponsor. Are you ever sitting there with a half-dead phone and you're thinking, man,
my phone's
if
at
only
75,
I had
so
a really mediocre charger. Like a charger that reminds me of my one of the teams of Overwatch.
Okay, do tell.
The Charge.
Do tell.
I bring to you our sponsor, a no-name brand phone charger.
Yeah, but that only works.
It kind of works.
That only works with an iPhone.
Well, yeah, that's the only type of phone I have. But, and even then, it barely works at all.
It might
and
as well not.
It will only work like one match out of the year.
It might as well not work at all. You know, hey.
Yeah, and you know, it might work like one match of the year. Get that one win, charge your phone, and then it's gone, and it's out of the picture, and kind of reminds me of another
charge.
Yeah, so charge your phone.
You got charge. Yeah, it was like okay. Well, I mean, the Charge are not a very inspirational electricity team, but the other electricity Chinese team. Oh, Spark looking kind of spicy. Like Dragons didn't look great against Seoul, but then Spark come out and man, this game, shades of Fuel right now. Shades of Fuel, period. Right now, you know, the 3-word phrase. I walked out of this game because we knew Spark were good, but I mean they played the Charge, so you were like, okay, Spark actually good. But I mean, them being able to roll over the Dragons, it's like, okay, no, Spark are legit. For the most part, we know that they're a good team. We don't have to worry about them. But Dragons literally have an identical start to their first week as Fuel did, getting boomed out 0-6 to, you know, two of the best teams in their region.
Well, and the interesting thing is, like, I feel like Shanghai and the Fuel kind of had similar stories in the last tournament as well. Yeah. Going into the tournament, everyone was like, oh, Shanghai looks really strong. They're likely going to win it all. And same thing with Dallas. It's like Dallas could definitely win this whole thing, and then they just kind of didn't quite look as strong as they should, you know. And I mean, they were still top teams, but it's like they obviously weren't
relative to the other top teams. Yeah. There was definitely
and so I feel like going into this next, I mean, this week for both Shanghai and Dallas was like, it's not looking good. Shanghai's not looking good. It's kind of rough. Hopefully they figure their salami out.
Well, and it's like Dragons, we saw it last tournament, last tournament cycle. 5v5 has not been kind to them because like they just can't rely on the, you know, Void and Fate can't be in together, and Void definitely looks weaker when he's just by himself.
Yeah.
And so does Fate. But then it's like, it looks like the rest of APAC for the most part, it's like, and even the rest of the league overall is kind of caught up to the Dragons in terms of firepower.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and that's something I talked about at the beginning of the season. It's like this dominant team from last season that didn't change very much.
Even 2 seasons ago, from 2020 as well.
Yeah. And are they going to be able to adjust to this different game? Because it is a different game, and there are like some big changes that came in that changed the feel of the game. And just the dynamics of how tanks work with the rest of the team, and what it means to take space. And I feel like, whereas pretty much all the other teams, they have really young rosters, lots of rookies that are getting play time. Mm-hmm. You have players that are just pumped and looking for blood. And Shanghai, they just don't have that fire that they need to make the adjustments needed.
They feel like they're missing something. And it's a second tank.
Yeah, and
they just permanently
that being said,
look like they're missing a tank.
Yeah, and they're still all like really good individual players, but it's like
that's not enough anymore.
Team play just isn't what it needs to be.
Yeah, no. Hopefully they get the stuff together. unlike Fuel, who are able to feast on lower teams, like APAC doesn't really have any lower teams except Guangzhou. There's one and singular, but it's like you don't get, like Fuel get, where they get a week where they get to play like New York to kind of get their mojo back. Shanghai just kind of has to get thrown back into teams. So APAC's tough. Shanghai, not the best team in APAC. Middle team may not even be the top of the middle, but that's kind of a toss-up.
Yeah, and I mean, they could come out next week looking stronger. You never know with them. Yeah,
I hope so. But now we move away from APAC for good now for this week, and we go back to NA. So, Shock, Mayhem. What do you got?
Mayhem, so lost. They just look so lost right now. I feel like Mayhem, they're having a little bit of identity crisis.
Yeah.
Where it's like, they just, in the last tournament cycle, they looked really strong. They had a clear identity. They knew what they were going to do. They were having fun with it. And it was fun to watch. And I feel like this tournament cycle so far, and that being said, they've had some, relatively tough opponents, although Fuel this week, whatever.
Yeah.
But they took a map from San Francisco, so that bodes well for them. But I feel like they're still just trying to figure it out. They were running some crazy stuff.
They ran a lot of comps.
And I think they just don't know what they want to do with it. And they could come out next week with that identity and do well again. Like
currently they look a little lost.
This week and this game, they just don't have that yet.
Yeah, they looked a little lost in the.
But at least they didn't C9 every map.
Yeah, Outlaws, Glads, double Charlie Niner. My goodness.
It was so bad.
Not only they did it once, they did it twice. Like, in a different universe, Outlaws are up 2-0 going into map 3, or at least 1-1. Because Push and Escort were close.
And they had
they had the momentum on New Queen Street. Yeah. They were pushing that way, and they
got the tank down.
Like they had
and then immediately
the hold.
C9.
And then on Gibraltar, they almost had the hold before Glad's capped third. They had the second to last fight. They had like a 4-1 ult advantage and blew all 4 ults in one fight. They tranced their own blade and then just beefed.
Yeah. And then they also in that last play where they C9'd, they got first kill.
Yeah, so they were winning both
5v4. They were winning the fight. They had ult advantage.
Both the times that they C9'd, they were winning and could have won.
It was a true C9. That's the thing. Like a lot of people are always calling.
No, they were true.
A lot of people
C9s.
are like, "Oh, it was a C9." Anytime like there's someone.
No, it was
alive,
two genuine C9s, and like it kind of encapsulated the problem of the whole match. The entire match, Pelican and Dante were like on completely opposite pages. Yeah. Pelican was constantly trying to go into the back line, and Dante was constantly getting bogged up front. And like Lastro was getting picked out the back. But like they kept it close. Eichenwald, we don't talk about Eichenwald. They were just boomed. Yeah. Like Eichenwald, you kind of like.
Although if you have 2 C9s in a row, it's hard to have them
kind of come back to it. Yeah. But the Outlaws, this should be your meta. This is your time. Please don't beat yourself over the head. I feel like the Outlaws, anytime they're not good, it's not because they're just getting diffed. It's because they diff themselves. It's a permanent self-diffage.
Yeah.
Perpetual self-diffing. Perpetually dropping the Chef Boyardee all over the kitchen floor every week. And
everywhere.
And it happened every season. Please, just come on. Stop it.
Man, aren't you glad you aren't a Houston fan?
If I didn't live in Houston, I would not be as big of a fan of this team as I am. It's only because I'm from Houston.
It's tragic.
I have a genuine reason to be a fan of the team because I lived there, not because I just, jumped on like a bunch of fangirls in season 1 because they're the boy band team, Anyways, final game of the week. A Uprising Eternal. And what can be said?
About time, baby! Boston proving that they are
not a bottom team.
Dominantly They are dominantly mediocre.
I was all like, dominantly not a bad team. I mean,
yeah, they're like the best of the worst teams.
There you go.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how they look. They make Valentine and Victoria look good, but I mean, Punk and Crimzo are legit though. Crimzo was taking names against Eternal, which I mean, it's Eternal. When you're playing a team,
but Eternal have been looking better the last few weeks.
I mean, they were, but then they came into this match and for some reason just went to Doomfist, and Dawn was perpetually feeding on the Doomfist. He would go in and he was just dead. The Eternal, I had hope for this team, and it was ripped away from me.
Yeah, they I think this match kind of cemented that little part of our rankings, where it's
it's like
do
Boston
I
is clearly
push Boston any higher than they were last week? No, but I think they
are definitely above the others. Exactly. So that's it for the 3-word game. We pretty much covered basically everything, but there are some things going on in NA and APAC with tournament seedings that we want to take a look at. So, I mean, obviously NA this week was pretty normal, but specifically the game between Defiant and Justice made things a little interesting because it pushed Justice out of the top 8, but then Mayhem losing to Shock and Fuel put their tournament seeding in jeopardy, and then Toronto. So in NA, we have basically a 4-team race for the last final teams. And so somebody on Reddit went through and kind of walked through kind of qualification methods for the teams. But, because when we look at the standings, right, like Outlaws and like Fuel, Glads, and Shock, they're in. They can't fall out. Outlaws and Rain technically haven't clinched, but there would have to be some like crazy like planets aligning turbo throwing for them to not make it. So really it's Spitfire, Mayhem, Defiant, and Justice are all in the running, and technically Boston is in the running, but I mean they're 3 points back and it would take an actual miracle, so we don't count them. So they're all in the running for the 6 through 8, and currently Justice is the one outside looking in, but it's no way easy. So looking at each of the 4 teams. So we'll start with London. So if London wants to get in, their remaining games are Paris, Justice, Dallas. That's at least 1 and 2, 2 and 1 most likely, 3 and 0 if Dallas doesn't show up.
Yeah.
So for London to qualify, basically they'd either have to just beat Justice and they're in, or just win 2 matches. So it's like they either beat Justice or they beat Paris and Dallas and they're in. Guaranteed, they're in. But if for some reason they lose to Justice, which if Justice shows up, could happen. So if London only beat Paris, then what they need to happen is they need to beat Paris, and they need one of the following 3 things to happen. Either they need Florida to lose 1 game,
or could be Gladiators,
Glads, and Boston. So they need Florida to lose
pretty good.
1 game, or they need Toronto to lose 2 games. Toronto plays Glads and Shock. Okay, that's fairly likely.
Looks pretty good.
Or they just need Justice to lose 1 match that's not them. And Justice play Glads. So in other words, Glads can help London qualify as long as they beat at least Paris.
Which, with the way Glads are looking right now,
pretty easy.
I would be surprised if the Glads didn't win all of those games.
Exactly. Or London just beats Justice.
Yeah.
So, I mean, London, for the most part, have fate in their own hands. And even if they don't have fate in their own hands, as long as they win at least 1 game, they're basically guaranteed.
Yeah. So I think London is a pretty solid. It's not a hot take to say that they're making the tournament.
Because there's 1 match between them and guarantee.
And they don't have a tiebreaker. If there's a tie, they're guaranteed in because they have better regular season wins.
Out of those 4, London is guaranteed in at least. But then when you look at Florida through Justice, things get starting to get iffy. So Florida, their remaining games are Boston, Glad. So 1 and 1. Unfortunately for Florida, there is no way to guarantee. They do not have full control of their destiny. There is no way that they can get in just by winning, because London, Toronto, and Justice can all equal or surpass the maximum number of points that Florida can get. Right? So Florida, what they have to do is they have to beat Boston and have one of the following 3 things happen. Either London loses out. Unlikely. Toronto loses out, which they play Gladshock, but they also play Paris. So unlikely. But they also need Justice to lose 2 matches, who play Glads and London. They play Titans, but they play Glads and London. So in other words, Florida are a Spitfire fan this week. So Florida are a Spitfire fan. If Florida beats Boston, London beats Justice, Florida and London are both in.
That being said, there is a world where Boston beats Florida, I think, right now.
Yeah, if Florida loses to Boston, it's over.
Which is possible. I think with the way Boston is looking right now, the way Florida is looking right now.
If Florida lose to Boston, they have to beat Glads, which is so unlikely it's not even funny. So Florida are hoping that they can beat Boston, and then they're just a London fan, because there's no way London and Toronto go 0-3. There's no way. Moving on to Toronto, who probably have one of the harder ways. Toronto and Justice have the hardest too, because they're currently in the 8th and 9th slot. Whereas Florida and London have some wiggle room, Toronto and Justice have no wiggle room. So Toronto play Glads, Paris, Shock, as we've said. And funnily enough, Toronto actually do have control of their destiny. They just have to win out, Forehead. Just beat Glad, Shock, and Paris.
Easy.
So
Toronto.
If they go 3-0, well, then theoretically they're in. Unlikely. So the more likely scenario is they beat Paris. And if they beat Paris, they need to beat Paris and have one of the following. London loses out. Unlikely.
Probably not going to happen.
Florida loses out. A little more likely than London losing out, but still unlikely. But the more likely one, Justice loses 2 matches. So similar to Mayhem. So in other words, Toronto want to beat Paris and then just hope that Glads and London beat Justice, and then that boots Justice out, right? So basically, everybody except Justice are Spitfire fans this week.
Yeah, which I think at this point everyone's kind of wanting Justice to not make it, just because the Justice
even last tournament
are going to destroy your Preds. The Justice will do everything in their power to make any Pred you do, or win.
Exactly.
To ruin your Preds. Exactly. That's the thing. It's not that they consistently lose. It's that they inconsistently
do
win.
Everything. Yeah, they just don't know what they're doing.
It's like you never know. Yeah.
But now we get to, speaking of Justice, now we get to Justice. So for Justice, their remaining games, as has been stated, Glads, London, Titans, 1 and 2. Maybe 0-3, as we're unofficially hoping for. So they can't independently qualify. They have to have some help. So the only way Justice make it in is if they beat Titans and London. If Justice beats Spitfire, it throws chaos into the qualification, because now everybody else no longer has that guarantee. Now, then you're hoping for, Toronto is hoping for Justice to lose against Titans. So Justice have like the trap card. They can throw a wrench into everyone else's qualification. So they have to win against Titans and London, and have London lose 2 matches in addition to the match. So basically, Justice is hoping London lose out, or they're hoping Florida loses out, or they're hoping Toronto loses out. So Justice beat Titans in London, and then hope one of the other 3 teams doesn't win a game. The most likely one would be, would you say it's more likely for Florida to lose to Boston or Toronto to lose to Paris?
I think it's Florida.
Okay. So then Justice are going to be Boston, or Justice are essentially going to be Paris and Boston fans. Regardless, it gives them a chance, because Florida and Toronto are going to lose to Glads and Shock. But it's that game against London is, if they lose to London, then they have to hope they can beat Glads. And that's like a common theme for all these teams. It's like if they don't win the easy game, they have to beat Shock or Glads.
Which I think personally, my prediction, it's going to be London, Toronto.
London, Toronto, Mayhem, you mean? In it?
Is it 3 teams?
There's 3 teams. There's 4 teams for 3 spots.
Oh, then yeah, it's
like
Florida,
Justice.
Toronto,
Justice
London,
has the
easy.
most unlikely one, because they are not favored to win the Spitfire game. Whereas these other teams, like Toronto, would be favored to win against Paris. Florida would be favored to win against Boston, even if it's slight. And then they can basically all count on Justice losing 2 games.
Yeah.
I'm not sad because I don't like the Justice anymore, as previously has been stated. So that's NA, 4 teams for 3 slots. But then we go over to APAC, and APAC continues to make no sense.
Crazy.
Anyone can beat anyone unless your name is the Guangzhou Charge, in which case you might as well just not exist. So when we look at APAC's standings, so Seoul and Hangzhou have qualified. They're in. So it is a 4-team race for 2 slots between Shanghai, Philly, Valiant, and Hunters. And the only reason that's the case is because Dragons decided they didn't want to win anything, and Fusion decided they wanted to lose to the 2 teams that didn't qualify last time. So Fusion left the door wide open, basically. Well, okay, wide open is putting it nicely. It's not wide open, but
is it's open enough that the Valiant and the Hunters could both qualify.
Well, no, it's open enough that the Charge still have a chance to make it.
They have a chance.
When you've left the door open for the Guangzhou Charge to qualify over you, you really need to go back and correct some things. So, going back to Reddit. Here we go. So Apex is a little more confusing because there are ways for it to happen regardless of matches won. So Shanghai, starting first, Shanghai plays Fusion, Valiant, Chengdu, Charge. Looking at that, that's looking like a 2-2 kind of record, maybe 1-3, but 2-2 most likely, right? Maybe 1-3. So Shanghai do have control of their own destiny. So they have to just win 2 games or basically just beat whoever wins between Chengdu and Valiant in the game this week. So they either have to just win 2 games or win 1 game. So Shanghai is pretty safe. It was just kind of like they were in a position. The only reason that they aren't basically easy in is if they win 1 or 0 games. But they play Charge. So they're guaranteed at least 1.
Even if they win that one, there's still a lot of scenarios where they still make them based off of other teams.
Let's say, for instance, we don't count Charge. There's no way anybody... Surely nobody loses a Charge. So Shanghai would get the 1 win against Charge. So they need any two of the following scenarios. They either need Fusion to lose 2 games, and Fusion plays Spark and Soul still. So, you can count on that maybe. Or Valiant to lose 1 match. Valiant still plays Soul. Or Chengdu to lose 1 match, who do not play Soul. Chengdu still has to play Valiant and Spark though. So as long as Shanghai doesn't go winless, they have a pretty easy way in. Because if they go winless, well, then they have to hope Fusion loses 3 games, Valiant loses 2, and Chengdu loses 2. Or they just win 2 games or beat Chengdu or Valiant, whichever one beats the other. So Shanghai's pretty safe. That third place slot should go to Shanghai. I don't really see why there would be a world in which they don't get it unless they really just throw, right? Mm-hmm. So Shanghai is the one that's more likely in, but it's when we get to Fusion, Valiant, and Chengdu that things get a little interesting. So Fusion do have control of their own destiny, right? So they have to win 3 games. They play Spark, Shanghai, Charge, and Soul. So they still have to win 3 games. I think it's unlikely. I think it's more likely they go 2-2 because I don't see Fusion beating Soul and Spark.
Yeah, but they could.
They'll beat Charge, but it's like Shanghai.
And they could beat Shanghai
depending on which version of each team shows up, right? So more than likely they win 2 games. So then they need any of these 2 scenarios. They need Shanghai to lose out. Yeah, that's not happening.
Yeah.
They would need Valiant to lose 1 game or Chengdu to lose 1 game, which, luckily, if Fusion does end up winning 2 games, then the conditions for Valiant losing 1 or Chengdu losing 1 will already be fulfilled. Why? Because Chengdu and Valiant play each other.
Mm-hmm.
So if Fusion wins 2 games, they're guaranteed because Chengdu or Valiant are gonna knock the other one out. So it's similar to the case of how London and Washington are playing each other, where it's that game means a lot. In APAC, that Chengdu Valiant game means a lot because it makes the path in for Fusion and Shanghai pretty easy. They just either have to beat the other one or just win games. So Fusion and Shanghai are the most likely ones to get in. Their path to victory, they have ways to guarantee themselves in. But then we get to Valiant and Chengdu. So for both,
and they're both kind of in the same situation.
They're in tied record.
They have to win every match, and other teams have to lose.
Well, they don't actually have to win every match, but they can't get in by winning every match. They can't. I mean, it depends on Fusion and Shanghai. I mean, if Fusion and Shanghai both go 0 and lose out, okay, then yeah, Valiant going 4-0 would put them in. But the unlikeliness of that, it's not even worth considering. So Valiant essentially have to win. They have to win out. Like the one scenario is win out and then hope that Shanghai loses 3 of their last 4, Fusion lose 2 of their last 4, or Chengdu just lose 1 game. So in other words, Valiant just needs to beat Chengdu. Guaranteed, like they have to beat Chengdu, and then they have to hope that Fusion loses to Charge and Spark, which is likely, but it's like Valiant isn't going to be able to beat Seoul and Spark. Like, yeah, Shanghai, Chengdu, maybe, but Seoul and Spark, there's no way. And it becomes even less. Like, more than likely, they go 2-2. Mm-hmm. And if they go 2-2, throughout, if they go 2-2 in the remaining games, the only way they get in is if Fusion loses out and Chengdu loses 3 of their last 4. So in other words, they would have to hope. Like, Fusion could lose to Spark, Shanghai, and Seoul. Okay. But they would have to be Charge fans. Mm-hmm. And if you're betting anything on the Charge, you might as well just stop hoping.
If you are, take this.
Take the teddy bear. The Dallas Fuel teddy bear from last week. And then
Dallas Fuel will loan it out.
Same for Chengdu. Chengdu's path in is literally the exact same as Valiant's, except they hope that Valiant loses 1. So if Chengdu beats Valiant, then they can get in if they win out, and then hope that Shanghai loses 3 or Fusion lose 2. But luckily for Chengdu, they don't have to play Seoul. So Chengdu could go 3-1, which if they go 3-1, then all they actually have to hope to do is Valiant to lose 2 games and Fusion to lose 3. So Chengdu's path in is more likely because they don't have to go through Spark and Seoul, whereas Valiant do. But more than likely, as fun as it would be to see these 2 teams in the mid-season madness, it's unlikely. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
But but there's hopium if you're for some reason a Charge fan. Hopium. So are you ready? Are you ready for the pathway for Charge to make the mid-season madness? Their remaining schedule: Chengdu, Seoul, Fusion, Shanghai. That is Charge's remaining.
Easy.
So their qualification, in order for the Guangzhou lack of Charge to qualify, they have to win out and hope that all of these scenarios take place. Fusion lose all of their games, including the one that's to Charge. Valiant lose 3 of their last 4. And for Chengdu to lose 3 games, including their one against Charge. I mean, Fusion could lose 3 matches. Will Fusion lose to Charge? No, probably not. Valiant could lose 3 games, and Chengdu could lose 2 games. But does Chengdu lose to Charge? No.
Yes.
No. Yes.
Charge is gonna do it.
Like, what's funny about the Charge's qualification is that the hardest part of their qualification is them winning the games.
Yeah. It's all the other conditions. It's like, I can see that. I can see it. Oh wait, the Charge has to win.
No. So those are the unlikely, APAC qualification methods.
That being said, the Charge taking any wins off of anyone
is already unlikely.
Potentially, mess with someone else's qualifications.
Exactly. Charge taking wins. It's like Justice beating London, or like Boston winning. It's like those teams taking wins off Glads. You're like, oh, they are suddenly winning. Oh, they've gone 2-0. Mayhem's gone 2-0. Wait a minute, But enough of the tomfoolery. Let's get to some power rankings. Why don't we? Shall we? Shall we get to some power rankings?
We shall, quickly.
All right. Well, NA, starting with NA, I mean, Shot, Glad's, Rain, I think stay up there. Dallas didn't show enough this week to jump, although I don't think there's a tier break anymore between Rain and Fuel. Well, I don't know. Do you think we keep the tier break there?
I think we do, because I still don't feel great about the Fuel.
Okay. So, but Fuel, Outlaws, Spitfire, Mayhem, like Outlaws lost to Glads, but it was close, so you can't move them. And London can't move Florida. Those 4 teams, fine.
Yeah.
Like the top 7 teams, fine. Then you get into this mess down here. So, Defiant, I think, jumped to the top of this lower bracket, right? Surely? Because they beat Justice?
Yeah, let's do that. So Defiant, and then
I would say
Uprising.
If Uprising and Justice played, yeah, I'd pred Uprising.
Yeah, just because I feel like Justice just isn't like.
Okay, so then Justice though would beat Eternal, they'd beat Excel, but then Titans aren't the worst team. After the performances they've put
I'll let you put them above Excel now.
But Paris didn't look great this week either.
Yeah, and Paris are still they're winless, right?
No, they have the one win against the Excelsior.
Oh yeah.
Like if the Paris that came out against Boston this week played Titans would win.
Yeah. So I would be okay putting Titans above.
Look
Paris.
At that, Titans! You're making movement. You're no longer 13th. You're 11th. Good job.
Hey, that being said, the two teams that coming into the season, everyone had it at the bottom of their standings for the most part.
Are not at the bottom of the standings.
Are not
anymore.
at the bottom standings anymore.
Well, bottom of the power rankings.
Well,
Vancouver's still at the bottom.
The standings, they're still,
it's kind of whatever. This is your week, Titans. You play Justice. Do it.
Prove it. Move up.
But now we go to the APAC region, who we haven't touched since kickoff class. Soul's number one, still, clearly. I would say Spark.
I think Spark is second.
Spark is second. But then we have this confusing mess. Other than Charge is dead last.
Yeah.
But like Shanghai, because Valiant looked good, but I mean, they beat a throwing Fusion team and the Charge, and they lost a map to Charge. I would say Hunters are above Valiant because they took Soul to 5 and 3-0'd the Charge, right? So Hunters looked better. So Hunters above Valiant, but it's like they both beat Fusion. So but Fusion threw against Valiant. So I would put Chengdu above Fusion. Like, is that a reasonable take?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
But it's what do we
do? The real question: where does Shanghai go right now?
Because it's like
because right now, they look like they could be beneath
Chengdu.
Chengdu.
But it's like they lost to the two best teams in the region. It was like when Fuel got stomped on by Rain and Shock. It's like, they got stomped on, but it was against the two best teams in the region. So, but it's like
they shouldn't have looked that bad, and I don't think anyone else in the region would have looked that bad against them.
Dallas got pounded by Shock and Rain. And no, I think other teams would get. I think if Fusion,
you look at Chengdu against Seoul.
That's true.
Like Chengdu looked solid, so I think Chengdu goes above Shanghai. I think right now
I would keep Shanghai above Fusion though, just because Fusion, you threw against Valiant. Like, come on, Fusion, what are you doing? So I think that's interesting. It's just so funny that Fusion are down here and they're gonna probably qualify for the tournament.
And then there's like 4 tier breaks and then Guangzhou.
I'd put one. Well, actually, no. I'd put 2. I'd put 2. I think there's a tier break between Spark and Hunters even. Well, no. They took Dynasty to 5.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think you leave the tier break.
I feel like you can't really put a tier break anywhere in the middle of those top teams just because week to week, it's like there's too much movement. In there, is there any extra tier breaks that we want to put in this basement section of NA? I don't think so. Just because I think it's
because I feel like Justice fills that gap. Justice and Titans fill that gap between Uprising and Paris.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then NA, Shock, Glads, Rain, top 3. Fuel, Outlaws, Spitfire, Mayhem, bringing in the middle, a solid middle tier. And then the Basement Dwellers, Defiant, Uprising, Justice, Titans, Eternal, Excelsior. The biggest surprise of this being Titans don't suck anymore. They're on the up and up.
Maybe.
Oh, yeah, maybe. I don't know. We'll see this week. And then
we still haven't seen them play against a weak team since they've started looking
and they won't.
strong. And so it's like, so
it's like unless you can consider
it's like
Justice
we can move them
team.
up, but we really don't know.
I want them to beat Justice so we can just move them up spot by spot.
Yeah.
But going to APAC, Dynasty, Spark bringing up top 2, followed by Hunters, Dragons, Fusion, Valiant, 2 tier breaks, Guangzhou. But what's so funny is if you put Guangzhou and NA, I'd put Guangzhou against Titans, Eternal, Excelsior, maybe even against Justice.
Yeah, I wouldn't pred Justice over Guangzhou.
So it's interesting. But
I don't know that I would pred Boston over Guangzhou.
It'd be close. I'd say Boston and Guangzhou might be similar. Maybe. I don't know. But anyway, that's
hard to say.
enough of
They'll
the power
never play against each other.
It is now time for some Preds. So first off, the NA games for next week are kind of booty. So most of our Preds for this are APAC.
Because we hate ourselves and want to make ourselves angry.
So first game, Shanghai versus Philadelphia. Shanghai has not won a map against Philly this season, which is very weird. But they're playing each other, and I guess the question is, who do we believe will who will bounce back?
It's going to be Philly. And the reason why is because Philly is the rock to the Shanghai scissors.
Because we're tied in Preds again. You know, I'm gonna take back your Pred real quick so I can. Somehow we are tied in Preds, and this is the first week where we both had below 50% Pred rate. I went 1-4, and you went 2-3. We got boomed by the Justice. I don't even know why did we Pred why did we do that? Why did we Pred the Justice?
Because Justice good.
We got boomed by the Justice. We got boomed by the Fusion, and we both got boomed by Shanghai. And then I got boomed by Mayhem, but to be fair, it's like few weren't looking strong. So I feel like I was kind of somewhat validated in that pick. And then the other one that I got wrong, well, no, it was just that one. Because the only one that we both got right was Shock Atlanta. But to be honest, in those first two maps, I was a bit worried there for Shock.
Oh, yeah. It was,
I was like, surely I don't go 0-5 in Preds.
Yeah, it wasn't an easy match. And
so we're both tied. We're both 31-13, which is a pretty good 70% pick rate for us, which is pretty good. So going back, so Dragons Fusion, you're Predding Fusion. I want to break this deadlock. Day one, I'm Predding Dragons. I believe in the Dragons to come back. I hope.
Have fun with that.
All
right,
good luck. You know. So I Pred Dragons to your Fusion. I don't know. I'm hoping that the Dragons pull like a Fuel and they play against like a mid team like Fusion and then kind of show themselves back up. But
it's APAC, so you never know. Anything can happen.
But push aside that weird game. How about what should be the Giga Banger of the week? Hangzhou Spark versus Seoul Dynasty. I think Dynasty take this. Dynasty, they're firing on all cylinders because Spark played Charge. And they beat Dragons, but I feel like Dynasty had the better quality second win in their win over Chengdu, who we say is the third best APAC team. So I think Dynasty take it out over Spark, but it'll be close. It'll be a really good match. But what about you? Are you agreeing with me? Or are you taking the other team? What do we got?
I'm gonna do it.
You're Predding Spark.
I am Predding Spark.
All right. So
I think it's hard to Pred that though, because I feel like Seoul
it'll be such a good game.
I feel like Seoul knows how to close out those close games.
Yeah,
a lot more consistently than Hangzhou. That being said, I feel like.
Well, I think that Spark.
It's a coin toss right now. Like
I
both
think
teams are really good,
Bernard diffs Smurf in the Sigma matchup.
Yeah, and so it seems like it's a pretty strong Sigma meta. And I feel like...
But APAC's playing ball a lot, so I don't really know. It should be good. This should be...
It'll be a good match.
On paper, this should be the best match of the week. On paper...
and I feel like this match should kind of cement what the APAC meta is going to be going into mid-season.
Correct. So that should be a good match. Continuing with the APAC trend, Chengdu Valiant. I feel like this one helps kind of answer... kind of where things sit. I feel like this is a pretty easy Chengdu pick in my opinion, just because we're in agreement here.
We're in agreement
because even though Valiant did beat Philly and they beat Charge, they beat Philly and Charge. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Valiant are great, but they're not that great. Whereas Hunters took Seoul to 5 and beat Fusion in 4. They didn't need 5, and they didn't need Fusion to Omega throw for a reverse sweep. So I think Chengdu are the better team pretty clearly. I mean, Hunters lost to Valiant last stage, but Valiant also lost to Charge last stage. So, does it really matter? No. So we're in agreement there. And then the final one to Pred here, Spark Fusion. I think Spark, I think it's pretty... I mean, unless Fusion just show up, but I don't think... I mean, because Fusion beat Spark in the kickoff clash, in the tournament, but currently, at current form, I don't think Fusion has it in them.
Do you know what I'm feeling?
No way you're...
Like agreeing.
Okay, I was like, there's no way you're feeling the Fusion upset.
No, I don't think so. Although after this last week, I don't know anything.
Yeah, so we're in agreement there. So
but
we're split. We're split on Shanghai, Philly, and Hangzhou, Seoul. But then we're in agreement for Chengdu, Valiant, Spark Fusion. So one of us is going to, and one of us could go 0-4 this week.
That's true.
But one of us is at least guaranteed to get 2 wins off of APAC on the other. But now we move to NA, the booty dumpster fire games. I was going to put Outlaws Reign in here, but I didn't want to mess up my Preds because I knew I was going to put Outlaws. Unofficially, sure. And unofficially, we want Titans to beat Justice. So those are off the books, off the record. The one game that I put in here because it just had a lot of, just like Chengdu Valiant has a lot of qualification to it, is Justice Spitfire. But I mean, we've both now made an oath to never pred against Justice, and you will always pred Spitfire unless it's against like Chalk or something.
Say, I won't never, like, there are situations where I will pred Justice.
I know.
I still
refuse.
feel like
nope, I refuse.
I'm going to, but this time it's London, so no way.
This win guarantees London's mid-season madness qualification.
And London is amazing. London's best team NA. And
best
it's
team
gonna be
EU,
wonderful.
But maybe not NA.
It's going to be great to see them just win the entire season, you know?
Again, flashbacks to 2018, run it back. But
also, they're kind of the only team EU right now. I mean, next year.
They will be the only EU team. So those are our Preds, our 5 Preds. Fun. So we had two split opinions. So one of us should be able, guaranteed, one of us will pull 2 games ahead.
Or no, we could go 1-1.
We could go 1-1. So there's a chance for one of us to go up 2 games, but there's also a chance for us to still be tied for another week. Going into that's crazy that we're still tied. But now we go to play of the week, or because of what you decided, not play of the week. This
shows. No, watch the team. So as you watch the play, you have the Outlaws close in on the enemy tank player, and it's just that's the key in this play, is just how good they work together to win this fight. Except
like Merritt's doing what he's supposed to do flanking, but Pelican and Dante, like as we were saying when I was talking about the Outlaws before, Pelican and Dante both go forward. And then when Dante tries to go back for point, he gets left. But they shouldn't have been in that position to begin with. Pelican should not have been running forward with Dante. Like, they were going to win this map. I feel like this one is more egregious than the Gibraltar one, because the Gibraltar one, Dante was peeling because Pelican was...
Yeah, and it was at a weird spot. It was at a weird angle.
And because Dante was peeling, because they had a nanoed Reiner punch back into the back, like go back into the back line on Winston. And so Dante was peeling for it, and he almost made it back. But this one, like, oh my, like Pelican's so late on, like Outlaws, please. Like when this happened, I just lost. I was there's no way. And then they did it again.
Well, and they had the team fight won pretty much. Like it was when they capped the point, I think they had 2 kills on the Glads. They had at least one.
Reiner was, I'm looking at it right now. Yeah, Reiner was dead. Shu is at they had momentum. And it just,
it was so close to the end.
I died a little bit on the inside, but luckily I can take solace in knowing at least they're better than the Justice. Sure. Even though the Outlaws drop Spaghetti, the Justice do it more.
Yeah, and they dropped Spaghetti against a good team.
It was close. It wasn't like they dropped Spaghetti against other teams. But unfortunately, Outlaws are playing Boston in the coming weeks. And that is the game that I'm worried about for some reason. But we'll get to that at a later point. So that is all for today after this crazy week. We'll now, we've only got 2 weeks left of mid-season madness. Should be interesting. We've got some fun qualification kind of scenarios coming up. Hopefully London at least is able to secure their spot, so should be good. We hope you all enjoyed today's.
Go London.
Exactly, go London, unless they're playing the Outlaws, in which case go Outlaws. But I hope you all enjoyed the episode. We'll catch you all on the other side of this week's matches.